Welcome to the podcast that is completely dedicated to reconnecting children, families, and the entire human species with the wonders of nature. So open your door, step on outside, and prepare for adventure. This is Nature Kids Radio.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me out forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Just turn me loose.
Hello everyone, I'm Kenny Ballantyne and welcome back to Nature Kids Radio. As many of you may already know, in addition to my obsession with kids and nature, I am also very passionate about providing equality and empowerment to young girls. I currently have 3 kids, 2 girls and a little boy, and I have a 3rd daughter on the way, which is very exciting. My girls are a couple of wild nature kids. They are fantastic examples to their little brother, and I am immensely proud of them. They love playing in the mud, climbing, hiking, kayaking, camping, and pretty much anything that you can do outside. They are tough kids who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and even scrape a knee or two. Unfortunately, despite all the advances of our modern time, we are still surrounded by societal pressures and individuals who subconsciously or even consciously discourage girls from being strong, wild, tough, brave, or leaders. This includes many barriers that keep girls from being full participants in outdoor recreation and conservation. And we can't have that. So I was absolutely thrilled when I stumbled upon a new book called A Woman's Guide to the Wild. And the author of that book is our guest today here on Nature Kids Radio.
I'm Ruby McConnell, and I am a registered geologist with the state of Oregon, and an outdoors person, and lifelong outdoors person, a Pacific Northwesterner, and I spent a lot of time in the outdoors growing up, and in graduate school and undergraduate getting my geology degrees, working at outdoor school, and everywhere I went, I was somewhat ill-suited. Consistently my skill set fell slightly behind whatever it was I was being asked to do. And I was also consistently in male-dominated professions and fields. And then at the same time was also consistently surrounded by really competent women who could help me with some of the things that I maybe thought men couldn't help me with, or maybe I was intimidated to ask questions. I wanted to make sure that I was going to be included and that I was going to be allowed to do it, and that I could keep up with everyone. And over the course of my years becoming more and more of an outdoors person, I kept sort of going to the bookshelves looking for an outdoor guide that was either specifically tailored to women or even just written by a woman, because I wasn't sure that, I thought, well, there must be other women that have some of the same differences of opinion or problems with equipment, or things like that, and I kept not finding the book. And so at some point when my skill set caught up with my needs, I decided that I would write that book.
Ruby's journey has taken her on all sorts of wild outdoor adventures, but her passion for nature originated in her experiences as a child and later heading off to summer camp as a young teenager.
I went to this really great summer camp, and we had this counselor named Bubba Nut, and Bubba Nut was super awesome. They had camp counselor names. And so like they would take us through a week of like team building exercises. So you're doing challenge courses and ropes courses, and day hikes and things like that with one another, fire building, things like that. But then at some point, they would kind of turn you loose and say, you're going to go backpacking for 4 days. And this is what it's going to be like. And you guys are in charge of preparing yourselves for this trip and then following the maps and following the trails and finding places to camp and cooking your food and setting, and Bubba's going to be there, but he's just kind of along for the ride. And we load into the van and we drive for a few hours out into out into the woods of Oregon. And we're sitting there, and before we get out, Bubba's like, "Are you guys ready?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do you have everything?" We're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You're totally sure that you have everything that you need?" We're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, so then which one of you packed the toilet paper?" And there was like this like totally dead silence. And then like panic sets in because we're like 13. And then of course Bubba had toilet paper for us, but like if he hadn't been there and if he hadn't been paying attention, we would have been, in a really tough spot. And that sticks out as like one of those like aha moments. So one of the things I include in the book is a lot of checklists. Um, because of that, because sometimes it's the most obvious thing that you forget, and often it's the most obvious thing that I forget. And so having, make the checklist once and then just use it every time, to me, then like you don't forget toilet paper.
So why a guide for women? What has led to this world where the outdoor opportunities and resources available to girls are not the same as those afforded to men and boys? How did we get here?
Well, I think first of all, it's a perception problem. I think that there are more women participating in outdoor sports and recreation than we're being given credit for, to start with. And I think that that's in part due to underrepresentation in outdoor magazines and outdoor websites, an overemphasis on male competitive sporting. There is, and I can't quote the statistic, but I do know that it's true. I think it was a study done by the outdoor industry, outdoor association people, who talk about that the content of outdoor magazines is overwhelmingly male-based, but the covers of outdoor magazines are overwhelmingly depicting female athletes, because they're selling the magazines to men on the front end. But that the real interest lies in what men are actually doing outside. So I think part of it is a disconnect in the realities, because you go to most trailheads. I was up at Discovery Park last week in Seattle, and man, almost 90% of the people that I passed were women. Hardly any men out on the trail. I was there 2 days that week, and predominantly saw women using that urban wildland. So part of it is misperception. About people, I think, assuming that women aren't interested and assuming that women aren't outside. But then on top of it, there's some really tangible barriers that women have, starting with a lack of coming-of-age rituals in our American culture. American boys' coming-of-age rituals are really rooted in the outdoors: hunting, fishing, camping, things like that, whereas as little girls are less likely to get that kind of training. And this dates back to the original Girl Scout manual from the early 20th century, actually states that outdoor pursuits are ill-suited for young women. The Girl Scout guide said that. So it's a sort of long perpetuated not only myth, but then also indoctrination and a lack of skill set early on. And then on top of it, because it's generational, since this has been going on for so long, we lack role models and appropriate female mentors. Right? So even if we do manage to get outside, again, I had Bubba Nut. And Bubba Nut's not going to talk to you about, what to do if you menstruate or how to go to the bathroom properly, because it's inappropriate for Bubba Nut to do that to some degree. And also because he doesn't have the skill set himself. Yeah. Right? And Dad is also going to have that problem, maybe, There's also really prevalent outdoor hazing that happens, especially in some of the more competitive outdoor sports. Mountain biking comes to mind, but it starts with the perpetuation of the bear myth, where we hypersexualize our young girls and and then also make them fearful about their bodies, and put them in a position, like, oh, I hope you're not going to attract a bear, sort of immediately makes us a lesser participant, and also implies that we might need rescue from our male counterparts while we're out there, or that we are somehow holding the group back because we've created this risk, which is not actually a risk at all and is a total falsehood. So we get that kind of hazing, the you can't do it hazing. And then on top of that, women are the primary caretakers. We constitute 70% of the caretakers in the United States, which means that we come with young people, old people, people with older people, people with physical and emotional and mental challenges that we are caretaking for, that we, in order to participate in outdoor pursuits, have to either abandon, quote unquote, or find an additional caretaker for the activity, or try and bring with us, which is a much more difficult task than just going off on your own. So that's where I think it comes from.
My wife and I go out of our way to find powerful female outdoor role models for our kids. My girls can go on and on about Jane Goodall, Rachel Carson, and Cindy Ross, just to name a few of our favorites. When I spoke to Ruby, I quickly saw that same kind of strength and determination that is the hallmark of all of my daughter's heroes. But of course, she will tell you that she only got that way because of the powerful women in her life that first inspired her.
I ended up with two absolutely amazing thesis advisors through my undergraduate and graduate research, one at the University of Oregon and one at Northern Arizona University, that were world-class field researching geologists, still are. Amazing women. These are women who think nothing of going to Antarctica. They're just like, be in Antarctica that week. You're like, okay. And they were really incredible. They were brilliant women, and they were fearless in field work. They would go anywhere and did so safely. And would take other women with them, went out of their way to make sure that they were producing another generation of researching scientists that were out in the field, which I think is really amazing. One of these women was working on Mount St. Helens during the 1980s eruptions. What's interesting to me about that is, there's that famous book, Volcano Cowboys, about that period of time. And there's no women, basically, characters in that story. But I know the women who were there researching, who were graduate students, and I know that they existed. But it's Volcano Cowboys. and I also know the men in that book, and they are wonderful men, and it's a great book. But it's interesting that they're just not mentioned. And they persevered, and they made sure that they were producing PhDs with that were women, totally competent women.
Of course, regardless of your number of chromosomes, every child needs and deserves time outside and a connection with the natural world. And that is something that we will continue to see less and less of if we don't step forward and demand something different.
It frightens me a little bit, actually, to be perfectly honest. I'm a big walker, just a neighborhood walker, to stretch my legs since I write so much, and I note the lack of children in the streets, in front yards, or in backyards. I note the lack of the sound of children in neighborhoods that I walk in. And I teach dance as well. That's my day job is teaching dance to all ages, but a lot of kids. And I am aware of the fact that the hour or two that they spend with me is often their only activity, and that it's still inside. Because they tell me this. And I think that it feeds into a growing obesity epidemic. I think it feeds into a myriad of health problems that we're seeing with kids. I think that it is really challenging. The loss of outdoor activities is really challenges kids with non-mainstreamed learning styles. Because I think it closes opportunities for teachable moments to kids. I think that it changes the way in which our brains process information and the ways in which we interact with the natural world. And ultimately, I think it's going to create probably several generations of Americans that do not have a firsthand sense of the value of the natural world.
To wrap up my conversation with Ruby, I asked her to sum up her feelings about this notion that women are ill-equipped for some outdoor activities. And here's how she answered.
Oh, it's bull honky. It's yeah, there's women aren't ill-equipped. Women aren't ill-equipped for anything. Neither are men. Ultimately, we generally sort it out. And just like any other challenge set before any people, young women need to decide to rise to it if it's something that they want or it's something that they think is valuable or good for them. And I think that in particular, like the kinds of exciting challenges presented by outdoor activities are particularly useful to meet and exceed and to be successful at, because I think that it translates particularly well into the rest of your life. So if you can meet a challenge in the outdoors that's kind of a big, scary, unfamiliar challenge, it's really easy then to meet some of these smaller, more familiar challenges, like, giving a presentation in a classroom, or going in for your first job interview, much more manageable and a lot less scary because you're used to taking on a bigger challenge.
Thank you again to Ruby McConnell for appearing on the program. Ruby's book, which is simply fantastic, is A Woman's Guide to the Wild. It can be found at sasquatchbooks.com and fine bookstores everywhere. If you have enjoyed our program, please help out our podcast by heading over to iTunes, writing a review, and giving us a 5-star rating. If you would like to learn more about connecting kids with nature every day, head on over to naturekidsinstitute.com, where you can sign up for a free webinar. That's it for this week. Until next time, I'm Kenny Ballantyne, and I will see you outside.
Give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood